School Board District 2 candidates. This is a non-partisan race. Everybody be quiet or move into the hallway, please. If I can see you. Republicans, quiet. Don't make me call your names out. This job pays $28,000 a year, and I'm sure many people do not believe it's worth it. Yes, I saw that school board chairman John Dick is here. He may have an opinion about that. All right, well, our candidates are here. We have Hubbard, Yvette, Mira-Talbott, and the incumbent, Andy Griffiths. We're going to start out with Ed Scales. Ed, take it away.
My first question is for Andy. Andy, I know you've been up and down the Keys campaigning for this job. How do you respond to the voter who says 20 years is simply enough for any public servant?
It's a double-edged coin, Ed. Out of the box, someone might see that as a negative because you might be tired and you might not be looking forward to the next term, or you may not be planning the future. And I got to tell you, I have never been more excited about my job. My batteries are fully charged because we just came off a very successful search for the very first hired superintendent in the history of Monroe County. Mr. Porter is a home run. And because I have 20 years, I have some good contacts up in the Capitol, and I called one of those contacts to come down and do a workshop, and I invited 40 people that I've come to know and love all over these Keys with great intellect to attend the workshop. And from those 40, they selected a committee of 20, and 2 months and 2 weeks later, here we are with our first hired superintendent. So I couldn't be more excited about that. So I have the energy of a freshman, but the knowledge and the temperament and the wisdom of a 20-year veteran. And this job is not just a simple job. This is a serious, serious job. It takes a long time to be effective. So I can start as a freshman out of the box with the energy, that'd be very effective. And I love my job, and I love this school district.
Andy, you had the unenviable position of being chairman of the school board back in 2009 during the worst financial meltdown in the school district's history. You also were put in the position of essentially having to manage two different wings of the board and how aggressively the investigation was pursued. I'm curious how you react or respond to criticism that you were not nearly aggressive enough and too deliberate. Do you think it's valid? And looking back on it, would you have done anything differently?
You know, I heard that question about would you do anything different a while ago. I had an hour to think about it. No. The big decisions, I did my homework. I did what I thought was right for the students and the taxpayers and the staff. And on those big decisions, I wouldn't change any of them. Now, when you're holding the gavel and the people on one side want blood and the people on one side want a slap on the wrist, you're going to have to forge a compromise to move forward. That's what I did. When you forge a compromise that moves you forward with 3 votes, you do not make everyone happy. Everyone's unhappy when you compromise. That's a very difficult place to be. But I'm going to use Larry Tyree as an example, because when I asked Larry about some difficult issues that he had, he said, well, some people thought I did too much, and other people thought I didn't do enough. Therefore, what I did must have been just about right.
Is that your feeling, that you did everything right, you wouldn't change a thing? There's no component of that entire episode that you wouldn't change in terms of how you reacted or move things forward?
Well, I'm sure there's some little things that maybe I had a knee-jerk reaction to, but I think that was few and far between. But on the big issues, you know, one person went to jail, A couple of people were removed from their job, a couple of people were demoted, and a couple are just no longer with us because they weren't renewed. So people were held accountable, and we have to move on. We have to move on, and I think we are moving on. So we have to stop talking about what's in the past and start planning for a very bright future.
Mr. Hubbard, could you tell us a little bit about yourself? I understand you practice law, where you practice, and where you've come from, a little bit about your background.
I got my law degree from the University of Southern California. I started off originally in the public defender's office and moved over to the Attorney General's office in the state of California. From there I went into corporate law with a corporation by the name of Fluor Corporation. About 27,000 engineers building refineries and petrochemical plants around the world. I was the senior international counsel. It was my job to make sure that the deals came together and the projects were successful.
Right, you need to look at the camera though, Mr. Hubbard. I was told you needed something. Just to follow up, then, how do you feel your qualifications or your background makes you qualified to be on the school board? I believe you ran for mosquito control too.
In my 30 years in business, I had to develop, implement, and execute large budgets. In the process, you learn a whole lot about budgeting. I've been through 5 cycles of budgeting with the mosquito control district now, which makes me well qualified to start looking at the budgets in the school district. If any of you tried to look at their budget, you'll find it's a very difficult document to work with. It's divided into 2 parts, and they're not really seamlessly joined in any location. So you have to pull out the answer. You have to ask the hard questions. I find a lot of times the hard questions are not being asked when it comes to budget cycles.
This is for Yvette. Yvette, again, you're a political novice, first time running for office. What compelled Yvette Talbott to seek the school board seat?
What compelled me to seek the school board seat is several things. One, of course, is the timing. The timing was very good for me. I just graduated my last daughter from Key West High School, and she's off to Florida State yesterday. And having spent many, many years as an employee of Key West High School, almost 10 years, and then 20 years as a volunteer, in which I continue to do so, I've become extremely familiar with the needs of the school system, the things that they once had, the things that they're lacking. Like many of you, I read the newspapers and I'm in tune with what's going on, and it just seemed to me that it was time to step up. It's very easy to sit around and dinners and so forth and criticize the state of affairs. But if you're not willing to stand up, take a stand, then you really have no place to talk. So I figured I'd get off the sidelines, quit talking about it, quit criticizing, and compliment, because some things are done right, don't misunderstand me. And I felt it was my time. And I've always had a great interest in politics, and I thought that the children of Monroe County were in dire need of a change. So I stepped up.
And then I had a quick follow-up. How many school board meetings do you think you've attended, and when did you start?
I would say 5 school board meetings. I did not make a career of attending school board meetings. I've been extremely busy running my businesses and raising 3 daughters. So I was in tune with the day-to-day operations of things, not so much the budgetary things and the things that go on at the school board meetings. But I'm not blind to what goes on there. I'm aware of what goes on in those meetings. I just don't physically attend.
Howard, this is a question for you. Several years ago, the firing of a Key West High School teacher, Nick Wright, got a lot of attention here in Key West and in the lower Keys. This is a specific question and also a philosophical question. One, do you support the school board's decision to support the superintendent's decision to terminate Nick Wright? That's a specific question. And then the philosophical question, Can you give your perspective on when and under what circumstances a teacher should be fired?
The second one is probably the easier one to answer. Teachers should be terminated anytime they're either A, not educating, or B, there's a morality issue that's affecting the students. Those are the two clearest examples of when teachers should be terminated. Your first question, though, is perhaps more difficult. Should the school board, had I been a member of the school board, would I have supported the same decisions that they did? The answer is yes. The school board's function is not to handle day-to-day administration. This is a decision that was made by, at that time, the superintendent of the schools, and it's one that you either back or you take him aside and talk about his management style and consider getting a new superintendent in there. It's not the job of the school board to get in there and decide who is hired, who's fired, except at the superintendent's level.
Question for Howard. Dr. Jarrett recently wrote a letter to the paper in which he discussed basically everything that happened during his tenure. And I think one of his regrets, and I'm paraphrasing, I'm not quoting, was that he felt like he could have made a better connection with the teachers union. Negotiations on a new contract currently deadlocked. I'm curious, where you sit as an observer, what are your thoughts on how the school district and the teachers union have been negotiating, and what, if anything, would you do differently?
Well, first of all, it's been an adversarial relationship. I don't think there's any question about it. Furthermore, you don't help the situation any when you make statements like, gee, we'd like to live up to the contract when we get a chance to. You don't enter into a contract with the expectation that sometime in the future you might live up to it. You've got to be willing to live up to what you're bargaining about at the time.
What if economic circumstances dictate that there's just no way possible to live up to that agreement, and you're going to have to make amendments as you go along?
Then you have to sit with the teachers union and make that amendment. You don't make it unilaterally by imposing on furlough days or other things. You actually sit with them and find out what can the two of us do. You also have to sit down and make sure that they understand your financial situation as to why you might not be able to live up to it. Sometimes, though, as an example, this school contract, a little bit of foresight, a little bit of planning might have resulted in a different contract entirely, and should have.
Andy, we all know that school districts across the country are experiencing difficult financial times. As little as 12 years ago, this district had a $12 million surplus. And now we're basically broke, it seems to me. Making draconian cuts, the state is close to taking over the financial reins of the district. The internal auditor has had to move $2 million of inventory, $2 million worth of inventory, so to keep the state at bay. If there's 83% of the budget goes to salaries. If you are reelected, do you have a plan to right this boat?
Just go back, we have to go back on some of the figures you used so we can give correct information to the public.
Okay.
78% of the budget is people. I'm sorry, 78% of the budget is people. Let me correct some of the other facts there. The $2 million for inventories, it's actually about $20,000. $20,000 in inventory, come on. Our fund balance at 2%, the state can come in and suggest to do a few things. 2% is about $1.5 million. We're double that. We're at 4%. We're $1.5 million above the state minimum. The other $1,980,000 in the fund balance is lapse money. Lapse money is when you lose a position mid-year and you don't fill it. Or you have advertised for a position at the beginning of the year and you don't fill it. That's lapse money. That's huge. Another huge component of our newfound wealth is that our staff hadn't been billing Medicaid for reimbursements from the government. That was over $700,000. So we just got to get the receivables in, folks. And staff has been focusing on that, and we've got new staff to do that now. And with a new superintendent, we might have some more new staff doing a lot of functions to find some more money. The property this year only dropped a 0.5 percentage point in value. In 2006, Monroe counties were $29 billion with a B. Today we're worth $19 billion. We lost $10 billion in value in 5 years. That's catastrophic. Now you can hit the rollback rate in the city by simply raising the millage. You can hit rollback in the county by raising the millage. School board, half our millage is set by the state, the other half is capped by the state. So when we have a 38% drop in value, guess what? There's nowhere to make it up because we don't have that taxing authority to go beyond the state cap. Now there's other vehicles that we can take, but they require voter approval, and we currently enjoy a $500,000 property tax that raises about $9 million, which is good for 4 years.
This is for that. Mr. Griffiths said that 78% of the money that Monroe County School District spends is for administration, salary, personnel. Draconian cuts, like Mr. Grusin said, have been taking place over the last 2-3 years, and it's getting to the point where you just almost can't cut anymore. Do you have any plan or idea as to how you could improve this economic situation that the school board faces?
Well, I have given some thought to that, and of course, the obvious answer is we need to look for new funding streams. One of the things that I've noticed is that we're lacking in grant writing. We have one person writing grants for the school system and no one to oversee it. That one person cannot possibly write the grants and manage them as well. I think that that's something that we need to take a look at. There's a lot of federal money out there that I think we can tap into, and I don't think that we've been doing it effectively. Another thing that concerns me is some of the real estate holdings that we have. I think we need to take a look at that and figure out how we can turn those properties into positive revenue streams. Just some thoughts that I've had on that.
This is a question for Yvette, and it's also a philosophical question. Continuing contract is a program that allows tenured teachers, tenured faculty members to receive automatic renewals of their employment contracts. There is a lot of debate in Tallahassee whether continuing contracts are a good thing or a positive thing for public schools. Do you support the concept of continuing contracts in our public schools? And can you explain your answer?
I think continuing contracts would be a great idea. They offer some kind of job stability for people that have reached their tenure. As any other position, I think that there's a review process, and if the teachers aren't doing their jobs effectively, then you would find a way to terminate their portion of the contract. But I believe that a continuing contract is something that teachers would appreciate. They're professionals, they're educated. They don't deserve to be treated like hourly employees who work from week to week. These people deserve to know they have some job security. So yes, I would say yes to that.
I have a follow-up question and ask the same question to Andy.
Actually, I want to go back to the grants because I've read hundreds of grants over my years in the school board, and many of those grants come from the federal government, and they require not teachers, but administrators to administer the grant. And when the grant runs out, guess what? You got an administrator left without a job. So you got to be very careful about committing yourself to grants. It's seed money for the most part. You got to be very careful. CC, I'm against it. I think what we have now, Florida's going to a little more progressive system where not quite an annual contract, but if you're good, you have nothing to worry about. Principals are evaluated on the same factors as student achievement, student achievement, student achievement. Now, a portion of student achievement is how we measure our progress. It's not the only way we measure our progress. There's a lot of other components, and teachers do have it tough now. I mean, there's more accountability. They always joke in Tallahassee, when they don't give you more money, they give you more accountability. And we definitely have our share of accountability, but it's not all based on MCAT scores.
Question for Yvette, and I want to get your perspective here as a parent who's got kids in the school system. You've watched the school board, the school district have to deal with roughly $13 million in cuts over the last 2 years. Where do you think they blew it? What programs or personnel would you have retained or worked harder to try and hang on to that got jettisoned? Personnel programs, anything. Is there anything that you feel that was cut that the board should have worked harder to retain?
I think the number one thing they should have worked harder to retain are teachers. That should have been the absolute last cut. Are we not in the business of educating children? I don't understand that. Yes, I'm sure there's a lot of valuable programs out there that could have been maintained or continued to run and operate. But, you know, we keep hearing about all this fund balance we had years ago, $12 million. I thought that was money that was going to be spent for a rainy day. I don't understand how we kept taking money out of that account in order to make our budget balance. And here we find ourselves where we do today with the state knocking on our door. And yes, we were saved this time. But I think it's irresponsible. I don't understand. I've never run an $80 million budget. I will admit that. I've run a $13 million budget. I used to work in corporate America too. But it's as simple as managing my own checkbook. How do you spend more that's in your checkbook? You dip into your savings account? My grandmother used to have a saying. You take money out and you don't put it back in, eventually it's gone. And that's where we are.
As a follow-up, I'd like to pose the same question to Howard. Howard, what personnel or programs do you think the board should have endeavored to retain versus cutting?
Well, we see that we get a lot of bangs for our bucks when it comes to counselors. ACE program is an example. They have one counselor for every 25 students. They've been very successful in retaining the students in the program and encouraging them to graduate. These are high-risk students. Currently, the mandate, or the guideline, I should say, for the rest of the schools is one counselor for every 250 students. There's a big difference there. If you really want to hang on to students, if you want to get a higher graduation rate, if you want to encourage these students to seek knowledge, you're going to have to increase the number of counselors so they can work closer on a one-on-one basis.
I'd like to ask you about the FCATs. How valid do you really think they are? Do you think we should continue them or need to continue them? And how accurate do you think they are as far as evaluating teachers, especially teachers?
Well, don't misunderstand me. I think testing is important. We need to know where kids stand and things they need to work on. I think they're over-tested. I think we need to decide which tests are the most important and use that test in order to grade our children. I think that by preparing, the teachers spend the majority of their school year preparing their students for these certain tests, because the result of that not only is a good report for the student, but also for the teacher. I think that we're missing out on some of the fundamental education issues that they're not tested on. And I think that I like to read today, the governor is considering that. So I think that I personally would like to see a little less testing, a little less stress on the kids. Some kids can't function. I know my daughter is stressed out to the max, concerned that FCAT is going to be a do or die thing for her. And I think that the pressure on the kids to pass these tests it's devastating to some of these kids. They actually cannot handle some of the pressure that these tests put on them. So I think that we need to relook at testing and perhaps we're over-testing our students.
Andy, I guess I'm going to ask you the same question. The FCATs, how valid are they in evaluating teachers?
Well, they're state law, and I support a follow the state law when I took this job. I do disagree that we should not do any more testing beyond state law. I'm always asking. Matter of fact, one of the questions I asked for superintendent candidates was, how many days of testing do we need past state law? And we got different answers. So that was very enlightening. I want to go back, though, to that fund balance of $12 million.
Andy, there was a follow-up to the second question.
What's that?
Yes, a specific question he didn't answer. Thank you.
Oh, okay. All right, well, I wanted to tell you how we spent it.
Andy, you did it.
Okay.
It's hard when you're a sixth term or running for a sixth term to stop being political. This goes to a philosophical question regarding education, the state of education in general. I believe that too much emphasis is placed on the academic side, the testing side. Yvette, where do you come down, and what would you do to implement a little bit better vocational side in the Monroe County school system?
Well, Richard, if you recall, I was actively involved in that program at Key West High School years ago, which was a mentoring program, and we encouraged our kids to take part in this, and out of that came a lot of wonderful things. We developed internships with Bell South, who was very active in the Keys at that time, with Lower Keys Hospital at that time to develop programs. Not all of our kids are going to go off to college. It's just a fact. So the vocational aspect of it is extremely important. We've lost a lot of those programs at the high school, and it's a shame because we need to help prepare our kids for life. And if it's not going to be in post-secondary education, then it needs to be in the VOTEC side of things. So I think that we need to support that just as strongly as we support the other, because every child just isn't equipped to take it to the next level.
Howard, I want to ask you the continuing contract question. I didn't give you a chance to answer that question. With regard to, do you support the concept of continuing contract for faculty members in the public schools in Monroe County?
I don't support the concept of contracts for teachers. Very simply, they're no different than any other employer out there or employee. We all work day to day, we're measured day to day. We either pass or fail. We find out when we fail when we get fired. Now, along the line, we do get performance reviews. Sometimes we get peer reviews if we're fortunate, as well as management reviews downward. These things help the teacher understand when they're on the track and when they're getting off the track. They shouldn't have to rely on, am I going to get a new contract this year? Or I can skate because I have a contract, or I have tenure and I automatically renew it. It should be more, you've got to earn your merits every day that you're teaching. And that's the way it should be.
Howard, a quick follow-up. I want to make sure I understand your position on this. You are not in favor of collective bargaining rights for teachers. You are not in favor of the teachers having a union. You're not in favor of contracts for teachers at all. Is that what you're saying?
Contract, you said contract as opposed to collective bargaining rights. I think they should have collective bargaining rights. You have to sit with the teachers and understand what their needs are. How many vacation days do they need? How many furlough days are they willing to accept? What kind of salaries are they looking for? What kind of pay increases? All those come into the collective bargaining agreement. A contract is different though. It assures a person of a given period of time in which he's going to get paid for work whether he performs well or not. That's what I'm against.
Question for Andy. You've been in part the driving force behind switching over to a hired superintendent versus an elected one. And you previously said, and again, I'm going back a few years, that the board should not be in the position of micromanaging their superintendent. I'm curious how you reconcile those two statements, and if it was a gradual evolution over time, I'd like to hear about it.
Well, with a hired superintendent, you can do a national search and get the most qualified person to listen to the collective voice of the board, our goals, and where we want to take the school district. And I think we hit a home run with Mr. Porter. But I think, I really want to talk about that fund balance. Because we gave it to the teachers, because when we passed that law with Mr. Padgett, we passed that millage with Mr. Padgett, it was to give it to the teachers to make them number one. And we've been number one 5 years in a row in teacher salary.
All right.
And I'm going to answer some of the other questions because, by God, I can't just let it go. I mean, I'm not an empty nester up here. After this election, I will still have skin in the game. Personally, I'm going to have a junior at Key West High School next year, and I got third cousins going into Key Largo School. So, all right.
Do you want to answer my question though about the switch over to the hired superintendent, how you can reconcile that and the previous comments that you made about micromanaging the board? That was the question.
I do not believe the school board should micromanage the superintendent. They need to set the goals and objectives and then hold him accountable for positive outcomes for kids.
I'd like to talk to ask a question to Mr. Hubbard, and I'd like to go back to the subject of bullying and how that's been handled in the schools here in the district. If any way, how would you handle it differently?
I don't think I'd handle it any differently than it's presently being done. You can provide education, you can encourage, you can monitor. That's probably about as far as you can go. We can't force people not to be bullied, but we can encourage students to stand up for themselves and bring it to the administration's attention that there is a problem. Other than that, all we can do is give them the tools to use.
Thank you.
Andy, this is for you. You've had a long term there, you've seen the past, you're looking for another 4 years to the future. What specific plan can you put forth to try to make the Monroe County school system more economically viable? Everybody is suffering in this economy, and you've witnessed firsthand the horrific cuts that have happened over these last few years. Can you put forward a vision of economic viability that we have the potential to achieve?
Yes, Richard, thank you so much for the question, but we do need to know a little history before we get there. When Mike Lannon left the district, 54% of our budget went to the classroom. When Mr. Acevedo left, it was 60%. Today, it is 66% of our budget goes directly to instruction. It's never been that good. Now, that's the money we have. It's very important as you cut the budget that you're not making the cuts in the wrong place. So, 29% administration cut in the last 5 years. 19% support staff cut in the last 5 years. 12% instruction cut. So that shows you over the last 5 years of the Great Recession, teachers got a raise every year and our cuts were appropriate. Now, going into the future, we have built in 20 years $250 million worth of state-of-the-art school facilities from Key Largo to Key West, built to Category 5. They're going to be here when we're all gone. And they are great facilities, they're great learning environments for our kids. They have the best. We pay off the mortgage in October of 2015. Do you know what the mortgage payment is, folks? $1 million a month. $1 million a month. So when we pay off the mortgage, same thing as if you're an empty nester, life gets a lot easier. And it's going to get a lot easier for us too, because the free fall of the property values is over. We had a free fall there for 5 years. We stabilized this year. It's going to appreciate a little bit next year. And at the same time, just down the road, we pay off the last payment on the mortgage. So that's $1 million a month of new income. But we're going to have to go to the voters again and ask them to renew that half penny in 2015, actually 2014. So that'll be huge for us. Not a new tax, but one that we've always had, that we leverage to build these schools.
Everyone, this is our school board candidates for the primary. That's going to do it for tonight.